Well, I'll be honest, I didn't want to just go back into the normal sermon. I've been in the middle of a sermon series for a few weeks. I can't even remember. It's over there, maybe 2 weeks or whatever. It's sitting right there on the piano for next week or whenever God is leading me back to that. But I wanted to be very sensitive to what the Holy Spirit was speaking in the middle of what's going on in the world and in our own community, in the United States, in our own church. And the things I'm going to say today are not going to be any news to you, especially the first part of this, because it's something that you already know. But sometimes when you want to get some kind of answer to something or healing, you got to address the problem first before you can get specific ways that you can get healed. We're going to ask the question and how to trust God in difficult times. Trusting God in tough times or difficult times or in the middle of your storm. How in the world do you trust God when your whole life, your whole body, your whole mind is saying not to? Maybe you don't need to raise your hand for this, and I'm recording this for later. Maybe when you're watching this later, you can raise your hand when you're in your home or wherever you're watching this. And how many of us have ever been to a place where you've been saying for years how much you trust God, and then the moment that you deal with something negative, and it's bad, I'm telling you it's bad stuff, all of a sudden that trust level starts to go down. Like all of a sudden, like you're finally, it's like in life, you're taking a test, and finally you realize in your own mind, I am failing the test. I've been saying for my entire life that I trust God. Trust God in the storm. He's the one that's in charge of the storm. He's so trusting of his Father that in the middle of the boat storm, he's sleeping. Okay? And then when he does get woken up, he calms the storm. Okay, so nothing gets God by surprise. So this is not going to be this mind-blowing thing at first, okay? Because our world is incredible turmoil, stress, and strife, and trials, and tribulation, and pain, and sorrow. And everywhere I look, it's negative. You know? If you're on Facebook, you know that. If you have Twitter, especially. Twitter, for some reason, it's like Facebook, but for I guess smart people, I don't know how it works, but you scroll down and you see a bunch of negative stuff. Negative. News story after news story. And it's like, I've got to turn my computer off. I got to turn my TV off. I got to do because what happens is all you're seeing is negative. And the reality is what, over the last couple years, we've heard the term fake news, right? Have you heard, obviously. But a lot of times when you're watching the world as it is, you're just saying the truth. There is negative, horrible stuff going on right now. There is no spin on that. You just look as an observer and say, coronavirus or the Middle East. And my point today is not to get political at all or even get into that. But the point is that it doesn't take a rocket science or a genius to go, there's a lot going on in this world that if you're not a Christian, it's no wonder that people are turning to one thing or another to medicate themselves. Not medicate like literally, but maybe they're going to this relationship or they're going to that drug or they're going to that alcohol or whatever to try to calm their nerves. And I sit there and go, God, thank you for letting me be so blessed that I believe in you, that I have trust in you, that you have shown yourself to be faithful in my life. And I don't know what I would do without God. Isn't that true with each one of us? What would you do without God? I don't know. And so, our little church here went through a coronavirus scare. That's not news, but I want to say it for everyone that's watching later on. And currently, I can't speak for the numbers of the whole country when it comes to the virus, but in our little community, the little part of Idaho, our state of Idaho, the numbers are a lot worse than they were the first round, at least in here. People were trying to get into hospitals. They couldn't quite do it. There wasn't enough help. There wasn't enough resources. As a human, it's pretty scary to look at that kind of stuff. And then the Middle East and Afghanistan. And here we are in the middle of staying at home for 10 days. And you feel like the world doesn't stop, even though everything for you has stopped. Like we shut the doors and I went outside to walk pork chop and I took the garbage one time and there was no one around, just saying. But, it was kind of weird to go drive into town and I'm like, this is like a foreign country. I don't even know what's going on in this world, but in this community. But then you turn on the news and you hear horrible stuff going on around the world. And you go, man, it's like taking all of our lives and throwing it in a big washer and dryer, or washer or dryer, and turn it on, the hot, high spin, just shh, and it's just spinning and spinning. And ultimately you're like, I'm ready to be sick to my stomach. And so I was, I could go on and on about how bad things are, but that would not be news to you. But you have to look at the reality of your situation. You have to look at the reality of our world before we can say, how in the world can we live in the middle of that kind of world and still be hopeful and still trust God? How in the world? That's the couple words I want you to remember in the middle of the storm, is you can be hopeful. You can have faith. You can have trust. You can have peace in the middle of your storm. It is not only possible, it's very probable if you put your trust and you put your hope and you say, Lord, this sounds so elementary, but Lord, I put my trust in you. I did kind of a little test this last few weeks. I wanted to see if everything that I've been preaching or believing for the last 20 years has been true or not. Basically what I did was, the moment that in my family, we started to fear a little bit, which, I'm human, right? Like the worst thing about coronavirus to me is not knowing if the worst is not yet here, right? You feel a little sick, or, for me, it was just I couldn't taste anything. That was just a it was a major annoyance, right? It's like, I hate this. I hate drinking tea with honey and all it tastes like hot water. Or I hate smelling the Vicks and I can't smell it, even though Vicks is okay. It reminds me of being sick anyway. But I couldn't smell it. But the worst part was going, maybe tomorrow it's going to be worse. Hey, does my lungs feel good? Wait, hold on. Oh, wait, I think it hurts. Wait, hold on. And you just don't know. And so the moment that we felt like there was this little bit of nervousness boiling up in our spirit, this fear, we stopped. And we said, that's it. Right now, and this sounds elementary, but I said, Lord, I want to test this to see if it's true. I'm going to put on worship music right now. Not later, not at 7 o'clock at night. I'm going to do it right now when I feel sick to my stomach maybe, or I just don't know about this or that. Then you look at the Middle East and you get a little confused, angry, and I'm going to turn that worship music on. I'm going to open up some scriptures. I'm going to read it out loud, and we're going to pray our guts out loud, even if it scares you to death to try to pray out loud in front of people. We're going to do it, and every single time that we did that, the fear just melted out. And then when it creeped in again, because it does, right? It's not just one. You don't just take, it's prayer and seeking God is not like a pill you take once and that's it. And you're done. It's like an everyday thing. It's like taking a vitamin C, right? You got to take it daily. You got to get your daily dose of God, maybe moment by moment, second by second. And so that's my main application for today. It's very simple for each one of us. And those of us who can't be at church because for one reason or another, is to, the moment that you have fear in your heart, instead of letting fear control you, instead of being a slave to your fear, you pause, you be still, and you seek God. That seems so elementary. You might go, well, duh. But the reality is sometimes even the most faithful Christian, the moment they have that fear creep up in their heart, it's easy to want to do some type of temporary solution to a huge problem. And when I was fearful, I said, this is not from God. This is not from God. So we had to pause. So what I want you to do is I don't have it on the screen. I just have that one slide. I know, very creative today. Psalm 46. It's funny, before we read that, I saw this on Facebook. It was so true. It was like this picture of this guy opened the door and his head's like peeking out. And he goes, just peeking outside for a second to see what part of Revelation we're living in today, right? And I was like, hey, that is so true. I had a conversation with someone the second day I was back at work. And as weird as it sounds, the things that we deal with in the Middle East, in our own country, and that kind of thing in our own lives, it's just proven Jesus' words to be very true, okay? It is not anything to be surprised about. because it's just proving the book of Revelation and even Jesus' own words from his own mouth. It is just proving his words to be true. So in a weird way, I know it seems weird, but in a weird way, you see the things happening. And yeah, you get mad. Yeah, you get frustrated. Yeah, you get a little scared, nervous, and fearful. But at the same time, you're going, I feel like the Lord is going to do something mighty, and he is doing something mighty. We just need to trust him. So I want all of us to worship God in the middle of our storm. I want all of us to turn our worries and fears into mighty prayers and incredible times of intense worship, because those are the ways to calm your fears. If you want the solution to your fears, listen to me. It sounds so simple, but if you want the solution to your fears and your anxiety in your life, worship, pray, read the scriptures. Probably, in the same amount of time, you're taking a moment to read like a sentence of the Bible. Just stop and pray. Stop and worship. Turn on whatever music you like, whatever, if it's this instrumental worship, which we have that on this computer even that we listen to, and we listen to instrumental worship, and it just gets us to remind us of trusting God. And so that's what it is. So Psalm 46, it was one of those moments that we were at home and I'm sitting there going, Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Every hour I need you. And I was like, the Lord said, Psalm 46. And to be very upfront with you, I couldn't remember what Psalm 46 even said. But once I started reading, I go, well, duh, that's an easy one. I've read that a million times. But at first I said, okay, I'm going to open up Psalm 46 and read it. And as I'm reading it, with the eyes of modern society and with what we're dealing with as a church or as a community or as a country, as a world, it made perfect sense. And it brought me so much peace. This verse right here, these verses 1 through 11 of Psalm 46, it's the whole chapter. It is the chapter of the Bible that brought me so much peace that I can't stop reading it. You ever have one of those chapters that you read in the Bible or passages of scripture that you just keep reading over and over and over? This is one of those right there. And when we read it, you're going to go, oh, I know that one. Especially a few verses, you're going to go, I get it. So Psalm 46, this is the NIV. It says this, God, think about this in the midst of your storm, or in our world, okay? This is God speaking to you guys, and David is he's confessing something to God. God is our refuge and strength. He's an ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore, because of that fact, okay, because of the fact that he's my refuge, he's my hiding place, he's my safe place, if you want to call it that, he's my strength, he's an ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Pause. There was a revolutionary thought that in my mind that changed my thinking when I read that. Okay? There's a two-sided coin here that often as Christians, as Christ followers, we get wrong. God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, I will not fear, even though the earth is given way. Even though there's earthquakes. This is very poetic in a way about troubles. Okay, so even though there are things in the world that are very bad, okay, metaphorical earthquakes. Even though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, the mountains quake with their surging, even though that's going on in the world, there is still a fact that I'm not going to fear. Why? Because God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our ever-present help in times of trouble. That is why it's a two-sided coin. Sometimes the things that we wish would go away are not going away. Right? Lord, bring peace to Afghanistan. I don't know if that's going to happen. Am I praying for it? Absolutely. Am I praying for people to be protected and Americans and Afghan people to be protected? Absolutely. But do I know the results of it? I have no idea. But even if things go in the wrong direction, which they're still doing that way, it's like the second law of thermodynamics, if you ever heard about that. It's everything starts really good and then winds its way down, and ultimately there is an end point where it's done, like that destruction. Buildings, it happens with buildings. You build a building, and at some point that building is going to be decayed and destruct. It's like a ghost town, and you have to tear it down. Okay? This world is on the downward spiral, and I don't know where we're at. Maybe at the bottom? I have no idea. But even though that's true, we can still trust God because He is our refuge. He is our strength. In verse 4, it says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. The author is talking about being in the presence of God. Okay? It's being in connection with God's Holy Spirit. And he says, God is within her, in this river. Okay, His presence is within her, this river. She will not fall. Okay, God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, right? Isn't that true for today? Kingdoms fall. Afghanistan? Anyone? Right? Okay. But God, lifts His voice, the earth melts. Pause. I didn't want to run past this little line here. God lifts His voice, the earth melts. My thought was, Lord, who's in charge here? When God is speaking, when God is lifting His voice, the earth is the one that's melting. What does that mean? To me, it means that God is ultimate authority. The ultimate authority is when God speaks, nations bow down to Him. The earth itself bows down to Him. What does that mean for us? You feel out of control. Your life feels out of control. Your marriage feels out of control. Your health seems out of control. People are still in the hospital. People are and everything's out of control, and you're on the spin cycle, and it's like, when does this ride end? You need to understand that God is in ultimate control and authority in your life. And that means that God's got His hand upon you. We just need to trust that. Verse 7, the Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations He has brought to the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields of fire. He says, this is verse 10. I love this. Get this. He says, be still and know that I am the Lord, know that I am God. You've heard that before, haven't you? Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Now, I give you a little challenge here. Homework assignment. The moment that you feel that anxiety raise up inside of you, you open up Psalm 46 and you read it. Maybe 3 or 4 times. It doesn't take that long I took a few pauses there, but if you just keep reading it way through, it has a way of building up your strength, your spirit, your faith, your hope. And then I read something this week, John 16:33, you know it. It says, Jesus said, I've told you these things that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Now pause for just a moment at that. Jesus has overcome the world in one aspect, but in the other aspect, in this world you will have trouble. Think about that for just a moment. It means that even though this world will give you trouble, that does not mean that God has lost control. Jesus has overcome the world. The world brought Him problems. The world brought Him horrible circumstances, and He overcame that. And because Jesus is an overcomer, guess what that means? You are an overcomer. It's kind of like that worship song that we sing. It's called Overcome. And I love that because the whole song talks about God, Jesus, you overcame. And the very last little bit of that song, it says, we overcome. Because Jesus overcame on the cross, He died, He was buried, and He came out of that tomb alive and in power. We can overcome. We have overcome. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. You may have peace. So it's not impossible to assume that Christians, in the middle of the worst storm that you could possibly have, you can still have peace. How is that possible? It's what you're thinking about. What do you know? Jesus, He overcame the world. Now, you could be in the middle of a huge trial or difficult times, and you could be an overcomer because Jesus is. Now, I said this earlier, but I want to be very straight with you. I'm not a very fearful person. Lydia, it kind of frustrates her. She goes, you just don't worry about anything. But over the last 6 months, there has been a few moments in my life where I have felt a little fear. Okay, and it's not normal. I grew up in a pretty decent home, so that might be part of it. There's not a lot that takes me by surprise, and I'm like, well, whatever. I just let things go, and I go, I'm just pretty cool with this, or whatever happens, happens. But this last few weeks, you're stuck at home, and you're like, I can't do anything. I can't go anywhere. I feel like this world is moving on, and I'm sitting there. I gotta be in my own prison, my own home. To be really clear and be fair about that, I think it was nice. I needed it. Okay, I was at home for 10 days. It was a staycation because I wasn't that bad. Okay, I could have, if I tested negative, I could have technically gone to work. So I felt good. But at the same time, there were things going on in the world, and we kept hearing people say, this is what's happening, blah, 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 blah. And I was sitting there going, I'm fearing right now. I had this fear and anxiety creep up in my gut. It's like my gut turned on spin cycle, and it's like, we always say butterflies, but it was literally like, man, I just feel weird about things in the world. I feel weird. And I sat on my deck and I said, Lord, this is not from you. In fact, this isn't just a concern. See, concern is one thing, because I've had people, well, you're concerned. No, concern is one thing, okay? But fear is like concern that has overtaken your spirit. Fear is concern that is owning you. Fear is concern that has become your master. Okay? So the difference between concern and anxiety is fear and anxiety, you become the slave to them. They own you. They control you. You are a puppet to them, if you will. They control what you're thinking about, how you're living your life. That's why it's bad. That's why it says in the Bible many times, do not fear. Fear not. Why does God say that so much? It's because God knows that when you fear and when you have anxiety and that kind of, sometimes you can't control that. Sometimes it's just part of our sinful nature is to have that anxious heart. But it's that it really does control us and brings us down roads that we should not be down. And I stopped and I said, Lord, this is a distraction that's keeping my eyes off of you. And like I said earlier, we paused. In other words, we were still and we knew that God is God. We took this seriously, Psalm 46. I was still. I paused my ever so beating and anxious heart, and I sat there first on my deck, and I'm just praying, Lord, this is not from you. Lord, give me peace, give me hope, give me reason for this. And so God really did. As a family, we had nightly prayer worship times, and it was incredible help. And worry did not overcome me. Faith and trust overcame. It's like here's worry and here's trust. We want to have that trust become the master of the fear. This fear is the slave to the trust. Who's owning what? Okay, in my own life, I've got to have that trust level of God be in control. And whoever's winning that battle, if it's the anxiety that's winning that battle, it's going to take you to places that it's not good for you. In fact, anxiety and fear, it even brings you sickness and illness. Have you ever had an anxious spirit or heart or gut, and you're like, I've got to give me some of those, that I need to put stuff in that water and let it sizzle a little bit, and you drink it, because it controls everything. So as a family, or even by yourself, you need to have times where you are praying, and worship times and prayer times and reading the scripture. So how do you view God in the middle of the storm? In the middle of your storm. Let's stop for just a moment. Let's imagine right now that you are personally dealing with something very bad. Maybe you don't have to imagine that much. Or you know somebody that is on the death's door, or they're dealing with stuff, or you just fear about the Middle East, that kind of thing. It's understandable. It happens. But how do you view God in the middle of your storm? Do you even look at Him in the middle of your storm? I say that because it's so easy for even the person who says, I will never take my eyes off God, to go in the middle of their storm and forget about God altogether, because you're thinking about other things. You're so concerned that you're like, how do I fix this really quick? And you try to get a temporary fix to a problem that takes something more than just a temporary fix. That's why, anxiety is such a huge thing. And sometimes, this is not an medicine sermon, but sometimes you need something more than a pill to deal with your anxiety. Sometimes, maybe all the time, you need that dose of the Holy Spirit to calm your spirit, to have that ability to be still and know that God is God. Who is God? He's a father. He's a good, good father. You know, it's interesting. That's the old worship, the worship set that we had on YouTube was our old set. And I think every single one of them, to me, had everything to do with what we're talking about today. So I love it. He's a good, good father. And he's not a father who's AWOL. He's not absent without leave. He's not a father who comes home from work and he sets his lunchbox down, his keys down, and he grabs a beer from the fridge and he goes on his couch and watches basketball or football or baseball. He's not a father who goes and dumps all those things down and goes in the garage and avoids his family because he doesn't want to deal with them. No. God is a father who is ever present. He's always there. He's like the perfect father. If you ever wish that your father was that father who was there always with you and had time for you, no matter how busy he was, your father was a good father. That's who he is. He's there. He's present. He didn't just dump the lunchbox and the keys and abandon you and run. He's there. He's there. And I want you to think about yourself as a little kid sitting down on your bed, on the edge of your bed. Maybe you didn't have a good father, so maybe this is just pretend. Your father comes in, sits on the edge of bed with you, and puts his arm on your shoulder and says, hey, how's it going? Just imagine that kind of relationship, but have an infinite kind of relationship that is God, the Father, who cannot, he doesn't sin, he doesn't mess up, he's not absent without leave. He is there with us. That's who God is. And so when we remember that he's a father that doesn't have like 5 seconds where he goes, oops, I just dropped you. Whoops, just dropped you. He's a good God. You know, it kind of reminds me of a story in the Bible. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Michelle had shared something on message with Lydia, and we were talking about it. The 12 spies going into the promised land. You remember that? You know, Moses sends the 12 spies to the promised land, says, I want you to scout out what's going on in the promised land. So they all went out and they looked. You know, they're probably from a distance. They're looking out and going, okay. And 10 of them, you know the story if you've read the Bible a little bit. 10 of them came back and they were scared. Their knees were knocking. They were like, Moses, we can't do this. In fact, read Numbers 13. Write it down in your notes. Numbers 13, verse 27 through 20. And look at this. They gave Moses this account. Remember, there's 12 of them, and 10 of them say the same thing. Moses, we went into the land in which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. So Moses, what you said is true about the land. It is so awesome. It's where we want to be. It's where we want to live. Here's the problem. It's verse 28. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. In other words, the people are so massive and big and strong. Their military is stronger than ours. And their cities are so fortified that we can't even get over the wall. How are we supposed to do it, Moses? This situation is too difficult. It's impossible. I can't see how we can get in there. So I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to say, nope, I can't do it. And he says here, we even saw descendants of Anak there. Those are the giants. We even saw, remember in Sunday school class, remember that you read about those people that were really, really big? We saw their descendants. They live there too. That's really bad for them. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites and Jebusites and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Now, I've read that before. Here's my question. Are they lying about the situation or are they telling the truth? This is not fake news. They're not spinning the news. You know, sometimes you turn on the news and you go, that's not quite true. That's fake news. They're spinning the news a little bit to get ratings or whatever. This is not fake news. They're telling it how it really is. This is the reality of the situation. Their people are a lot bigger than they are. They're outnumbered. We're like grasshoppers to them. We didn't read that part. You know, their cities are fortified. Tall walls. Probably not barbed wire, but barbed wire will say. We can't get over the walls. So they're saying the truth. They're not lying about the situation. They're stating the facts. So the situation they found themselves was, we are overwhelmed and we're outnumbered and we cannot do this, period. Because they're looking at the situation with their physical eyes and that's it. Then they had two people, Caleb and Joshua, who saw the same situation through eyes of faith. The situation was bad. They didn't deny the truth. They didn't deny that was the truth. They didn't put their head in the sand like, oh, well, we're just going to ignore the fact that there's giants in land. We're going to ignore the fact that the city is fortified. Then look at verse 30. I love this. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, hey, if this was the Joel William Bremer version of the Bible, he would have gone up to Moses and everybody was like, no, and they were bickering and fighting and saying, I'm scared. And he would say, be quiet, everybody. Stop it. Shut your mouth. That's what I would think they would say. I don't know if that's true or not. But then he says, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Why? They saw the same situation, but they saw it with two different sets of eyes. Two different perspectives. They both saw the same situation. This is pretty bleak. This is pretty bad. And so when we look at situations in this country, in the coronavirus or whatever, and it's getting worse, and mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and we see all this stuff, and then we go out to the Middle East and we do this, and the government, and we do this, and it is so easy to just sit there and look at all those things and go, I don't have any control over any of that. Maybe that was the worst thing about being at home for 10 days. It was good. Don't get me wrong. I'd stay home for 10 more days if I could. But it was like, I am so out of control right now. I have no control of anything right now. I'm at the mercy of people bringing me food. Which we were okay. We were good, But if you keep your eyes fixed on the problem only, with just that natural tendency to go, oh, I'm just like the 10 people. They're like, we can't do this. Here's the situation. Here's the truth. We can't do it. But then Caleb and Joshua, they were the ones that said, no, we see the same thing with eyes of faith, with eyes of hope, with eyes of trust. That, the position that we're in right now it's bad. It's horrible. But we know a God who's even more powerful than that. Who's stronger than that fortified wall? God. Who's stronger than those people that are in the land that's way stronger than them? God. So, how in the world does this happen? I want to remind you of the tail end of Psalm 46. We read it already, verse 10 and 11. God says, be still and know that I'm God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. How do we trust God in difficult times? This ain't rocket science. It's very simple. You pause your ever so beating and nervous and anxious heart. You pause. And I realize it's easier said than done. Sometimes you're praying and you're even physically on your knees praying, and then all of a sudden you think about something that you're dealing with. I mean, isn't that true? You're in the middle of worshiping God, and then you realize, I got a thing I'm dealing with right over here. Right? That's the condition of our mind. That's why we need to renew our mind. God is in control. How do you get that way? How do you get it so anxiety doesn't control you? I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you prescriptions. But what I can say is the more time that you spend with God, the more time that you are reading the Word, you're worshiping, you're praying, the residual effect of that will be that you have hope, that you have peace, that you have, I'm not going to say anxiety-free. But what I will say is that fear and that anxiety will not take control of your life. You have the authority through Jesus Christ to take control of that feeling of anxiety. You have the authority over it. It does not have the authority over your life. Fear and anxiety does not have the authority really over your life. If you're in Christ, you have that authority to stop that and say, no, But it does, you're human like I am. It's not just about you. It's about pausing your ever so nervous heart and going, Lord, I trust in you. Confess it. Lord, I trust you. Lord, I'm going to pause. I'm going to rest. I'm going to be still. And the more you do that, the more you're going to have faith and trust that's ruling your heart, not fear and anxiety. I want to close in prayer.